Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis Cox with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to bring you your forecast for our upcoming partial solar eclipse and new moon happening in sidereal Sagittarius this Saturday, the 5th. And that's Pacific time. We're going to have some place to see this activity on the 6th. So we have our sun and moon coming together in sidereal Sagittarius. And this is the section of the sky, or the section of the zodiac where we really come in tune with our teachings, our belief systems, our ideals, what we believe to be wisdom, and what inspires us, what brings us hope. Sagittarius is the fiery or externalized energy of the planet Jupiter. So we are going out into the world and establishing what we believe by learning from others, and then also often sharing those beliefs and teaching others. So whether or not you're actually a teacher or somebody who speaks or shares publicly is not necessarily the point. There are many ways in which we stand on our pulpits and share our belief systems. The moon and sun are also going to be joined, both Saturn and Mercury. So we have quite a lot of different energies coming on here in this new moon and partial solar eclipse. So I'll start with the star that's the new moon is in. It's called Purva Ashada. It's at the middle point of Sagittarius, and it's a star that means early victory. When we were in the earlier part of Sagittarius, the first star is called Mula, and it's the root. And that's where we sort of uproot things that aren't working, let everything just be destroyed. And then we start to carefully plant new seeds and tend those seeds. And that's the early victory. The early victory is deciding what you do want to plant in the open earth, or the open wounds of yourself that have been laid raw by the upheaval, and tending those, doing things to keep those alive or to bring them into creation and health. So if you made any New Year's resolutions, or there were things from this past year that really came into light for you that you needed to take care of, it's those little details, those little things you do every day that tend to what you're ultimately trying to cultivate, what you're ultimately trying to plant in your life. So Purva Ashada is again right in the middle of Sagittarius, so it doesn't cross the boundaries of another sign, but the lunar node, the eclipse point that's actually eclipsing the sun, is in Capricorn. It's in sidereal Capricorn at very early degrees, in the other nakshatra, Uttarashada, which is the later victory, where you start to reap some more of those rewards of what you planted and what you've been tending. When we see the eclipse point far from the luminary that it's eclipsing, from the moon in a full moon and lunar eclipse, and from the sun in a solar eclipse, we see that it's a partial eclipse. So it's not ever going to be completely covering the sun. Here in California, we won't be seeing it at all. But even in Asia or parts of the world where they will be seeing it, it will never be full. It'll just be a little partial eclipse at the max point of that. And so what it means is it's not being fully, the energy isn't fully resetting. It's not fully blacking out and to be re-illumined in a new light. It's only a little bit happening. And Capricorn, being a really practical sign, a sign that rules over our efforts, our daily work and responsibilities and efforts, and even the fears that drive those efforts, the cold realities and the awareness of time and the humility and hard work that's necessary in order to get stuff done that needs to be done, is going to be sort of eclipsing that part of us that is passionately inspired by our beliefs. And the sun is really powerful in Sagittarius because we have a connection to our soul consciousness is connected to our teachings and to our spiritual belief path. But of course, not all teachings are good. Some of them are, inspired by poor roots. They're founded on what's not true. and so doesn't change people from championing those beliefs or believing in those systems. It just makes it a shoddy foundation. It makes it the belief system itself is a shoddy foundation. And what Capricorn energy eclipsing will do is call upon our own higher self to check in with how our belief systems are operating in the actual world, and how we personally, whether our systems are sound or not, are effectively using those beliefs and ideals and inspirations to practically handle life's responsibilities. Are we showing up also in the real world, or are we just sort of inspired pulpit standers? Are we doing the necessary work to keep our ducks in a row so that we can keep our spiritual practices alive and working for us, because they only work if we do functional practices and we are maintaining our external lives. So this is maybe not the most fun eclipse. They're not all fun. Most of them maybe aren't. We've had quite a year, and the eclipse point is at the end of its time. So our axis that we've been on with the North Node in Cancer, the South Node in Capricorn, we've been on it since roughly like August of 2017. We're on the tail end of that. So this is the last two eclipses, this partial solar eclipse and our full lunar eclipse in 2 weeks. They're the last two eclipses in this cycle of this thing that we're not wanting to deal with, quite honestly, because the South Node is somewhere where we just don't want to deal with it. So we have been like eschewing our responsibilities and our practical needs in many regards. And of course, this summer, or this time from May to October, which covered the summer and then some, when Mars was joined K2, the South Node, we saw that whether we wanted to deal with it or not, we had no choice. That stuff blew up, and we had to deal with our responsibilities. And for many of us, it wasn't fun at all. We also had to deal with, deep fears and like I said, fears that sort of compel us to do what we need to do. And because Saturn really rules over the deepest fear that we all carry and share, our fear of death, we had to reckon with life and death situations in many cases. So this journey we've been on with the South Node in Capricorn is like finishing out. It's at its end. And I think for many of us, that's, we're ready to say goodbye. It's been fun. We are appreciating of the lessons we've learned and the strength we've seen that we have, but we're also still not really wanting to deal with it. So whatever is left, whatever that thing is that you haven't fully mastered yet, or whatever the lesson is you haven't fully understood and gained, is coming up for you one last time in this eclipse, and it will really be linked to your belief systems and your ideals. The lunar eclipse will be with the full moon in Cancer, and that will be our final eclipse of the season, and that's going to be a really big one for us. So I will do a report on that in a couple weeks when we get closer to it. The eclipse, just so you know the timing, the maximum point of this partial eclipse is going to be around 5:40 p.m. Pacific time, and the new moon's exact time will be 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. So that's why we won't see it. The sun will be going down here in the West Coast, and already be down on the East Coast of the United States. So we're really looking at more like Asia that will see anything at all. Like I said, the moon and sun are joined Mercury and Saturn for this eclipse, and Saturn has been really close to the sun. The past few days we've seen the sun pass Saturn, because the sun moves much quicker. Well, the sun doesn't move at all, but the way that the degrees work of our Earth perspective moving, the sun passes through a sign much quicker than Saturn does. Saturn stays in a sign for about 2.5 years, and the sun stays in a sign for about a month. So the last few days, or the last week and some change, have been probably the most intense part, where we've seen Saturn, what we call combust, where it's super close to the sun and being burned up by the sun's energies, being burned up by the sun's rays, and perhaps making us feel a little put upon, a little kind of woe is me. I'm all this work is on my shoulders, all these efforts that I have to put in, all this, grudge detail stuff that I don't want to deal with is on me. And, I'm like Cinderella and everybody else is like a stepsister, and I'm being asked to do more than others, which is really the energy Saturn feels when it's combust. But of course that's not true, because we're all feeling it. So everyone's Cinderella here. And it's, again, coupled with that ending of the South Node in Capricorn, we've just had about enough of those responsibilities, and dealing with the dirty work or the hard work we haven't really wanted to deal with. So, the sun is moving past this point. We're moving out of that feeling, and perhaps even though we felt that way, maybe we did actually get some stuff done, so that's good. And maybe we will start to shift our perspective on how much we personally are shouldering. And if we really feel like the whole world is on our shoulders, maybe that feeling is starting to lighten a little bit in these few days. Now the sun is, for the new moon, which will be, I'm doing this on the 4th, so that'll be on the 5th, tomorrow. The degrees will be at 4 degrees apart. So the sun will have already moved 4 degrees past Saturn. We have also Mercury moving in here, and it's at early degrees, it's 7 degrees Sagittarius. And Mercury has just come out of a sort of emotional, passionate bout in Scorpio. When Mercury's in Scorpio, we can be really blah with our language, really emotional, controlling, passionate, not precise, and sometimes fiery, sometimes kind of weepy. When Mercury moves into Sagittarius, we take on a new persona. We take on a persona called I know everything and I want to share it. So that pulpit standing that can occur with Sagittarius in general really takes on new heights when Mercury is there. And Mercury is not super close to the sun, so we don't see that heavy combustion where we feel like no one's listening, which can make us maybe quieter. We instead just feel that burst of enlightenment that we really want to share with everyone, our beliefs and ideals. And that can be great. But one of the things we have to look at is that while Mercury shifted into Sagittarius, Venus, the planet of relationships, shifted into Scorpio. So Venus has been in the sign of Libra in her own space, and creating a lot of harmony, a lot of desire to get along, maybe making compromises in our relationships. And now that Venus is in Scorpio, compromising is not going to be as much a plan or a driving force. We're going to feel more of that energy that I described with Mercury, where we feel, when Mercury was in Scorpio, where we feel more controlling, more emotional, more passionate. Scorpio is a water sign, but it's ruled by Mars, which is a fire sign. And there's this passionate, emotional drive in Scorpio that ultimately can be very, very, very spiritual and can bring you to great, great heights of self-understanding. But more often than not, it begins with a lashing out, a scorpion type sting at others. And this is part of fear. When we are afraid that someone else is going to hurt us, we bite them first or sting them first. And we try to control, with Mercury, our language and the way they think, and how can we get in their mind and make them feel this way. With Venus, we're going to be just feeling that energetic within our relationship itself. So we're going to be just less likely to compromise and more likely to bring drama into the relationship, and more likely to have all of the fears we have come up. And this is not just romantic relationships, of course, it's any kind of partnership with another adult. So any situation where there's two adults that have mutual needs sitting on a table that need to be met through compromise, and of course, less compromise available. Furthermore, that Mercury in Sagittarius can really make us explain why we're right, explain to the other person why we're right. So instead of controlling through emotional, passionate tactics, we control by forcing our opinion and belief system down the other person's throat. And that has its own challenges and drawbacks. Because Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is in Scorpio, we see that there's some potential for self-reflection. Jupiter's been there since October, so we have, we have this real potential. This whole year that Jupiter's in Scorpio, we have a real potential to see ourselves true and to understand our teachings from our own shadow perspective. So not just what others should be doing or what is right teaching or wisdom, but also really reflecting on our own path with that, and whether or not we're showing up, and what our fears are, what our dark places are that we don't always want to visit. So there is that potential. It's early yet in that transit, so it kind of depends on how much intelligence we have with Jupiter energy to begin with in our natal charts, and just what our personal path is as to how much self-reflection we've managed to get to so far. We do have another really helpful alignment right now where we have Jupiter and Mars in exchange of signs. So Mars is in Jupiter sign of Pisces, and I believe moved there on December 22nd, and Jupiter is in Mars' sign of Scorpio. So when two planets exchange signs like that, we have a really there's a really powerful energetic exchange that occurs, where Mars is offering that courage, that discipline, that strength to Jupiter to really show up in the shadow places and really face with courage the ways in which we may or may not be taking on our own teachings. And Jupiter's offering that wisdom and that clarity of vision and inspiration to Mars in Pisces, giving the courage and the discipline and the action that Mars brings a really heightened intuition and spiritual connection and connection to teachings and teachers. So there's a lot of potential here, especially with that particular alignment with Jupiter in Scorpio and Mars in Pisces. The two do well in each other's signs too, so it's not just an energetic exchange. You see that they both enjoy being in each other's signs. Mars is a bit more emotional in Pisces than we necessarily want to be in our action, but because Pisces is so spiritual and so connected to Source with this exchange of signs, and it's not even just an exchange of signs, Jupiter is actually giving a one-way gaze as well onto Mars. We see that intuition is just going to be very heightened. So while we might be acting from a more a more subtle place or a more emotional place than maybe Mars is most comfortable with, it's going to be really tuned in. The odds of it being tuned in are high, and that is very powerful. That can be the most informed action. Certainly better than just emotional action with no wisdom attached. So we see a lot of potential here for following through with our teachings, for following our wisdom, our knowledge, our higher knowledge, and our connection to Source, and for really being able to show up with courage and face what about ourselves is and is not aligned with those teachings and with that wisdom that we believe we carry, and those beliefs and inspirations that we are so good at sharing with others, but don't always really put into practice ourselves. So this is a good time for that, putting things into practice and showing up for ourselves. And ultimately that is showing up for others. The more we are integral in what we believe and what we're actually practicing ourselves, the better we can be as teachers and sharers, and people on a spiritual path, because we're just more honest. There's just more honesty available. So that is a bonus. So I hope this is helpful, and we are going to be again coming into the final eclipse in this season, in this whole axis that we've been in is going to be a full lunar eclipse, totally visible from North America in sidereal Cancer, and it's going to be bringing in that energy of the mother and all that we have embarked on with the feminine energy over this last year and a half, all the strides we've taken to really put not just actual women, but the feminine itself up and in a visible spot is all going to really take its final hurrah for the season. So it's exciting, and that will be 20th, 21st. So I hope your new year is off to a great start. If this video was helpful to you, you can like or comment below, and you can also feel free to share with others. Thank you so much, and blessings. Namaste.